The air in the auction house back room before a record sale hung heavy with the scent of old money and older dust. It clung to the velvet ropes, the polished mahogany of display cases, and the hushed whispers of the staff. Your gaze, sharp despite the weariness etched around your eyes, swept over the collection of antique firearms laid out on felt-covered tables. A grim parade of polished steel and dark wood, each piece a silent testament to past violence, now merely an object of desire for collectors. The auctioneer, a man whose smile seemed permanently affixed, moved with practiced grace, his hands gloved as he meticulously arranged a tray of diamond-encrusted brooches. He caught your eye, a fleeting acknowledgement of your presence, and you offered a nod, devoid of warmth. You understood the intricate dance of wealth and acquisition, the careful choreography of desire. Arthur Vance. The name once carried a certain weight, a quiet authority. Now it was often met with a hesitant glance, a faint recognition of a story whispered in hushed tones. The detective who fell, the case that broke him. The memory of it was a persistent ache, a ghost that clung to your periphery, a phantom limb that still throbbed with unfulfilled justice. A sudden, sharp movement by the back entrance broke the quiet tableau. A woman stood there, framed by the utilitarian light of the service corridor, her silhouette a stark contrast to the opulent display. Her hair was a disheveled storm, her eyes wide and frantic, scanning the room with a desperate urgency that cut through the genteel calm. He was not a collector, not a staff member. Her cheap, rain-streaked coat and worn handbag spoke of a different world, one far removed from the glittering baubles and antique weaponry. Your instinct, long dormant but never truly dead, flared. You watched her, a silent sentinel as she spotted you. Her gaze locked onto yours with the intensity of a drowning person clutching at a lifeline. He moved then, a rapid, almost stumbling gait, navigating the tables with a singular purpose. Arthur Vance? His voice was hoarse. They said you might be here. You straightened, your posture betraying nothing of the internal sigh that rippled through you. Another lost soul, another desperate plea. This was your new currency, your grim trade. That's me, you replied, your voice gravelly, a low rumble that carried no false promises. My daughter, she began, her hands clenching and unclenching. Clara, she's gone. The words tumbled out, each one a sharp shard of pain. The police, they won't listen. They say she's a runaway, a young woman, they said, prone to flights of fancy. Her lip quivered, and a single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. But Clara isn't like that. She's a journalist. He was working on something important. A journalist. The word hung in the air, a faint echo of your own downfall. Journalists, like detectives, often dug where they weren't wanted. Tell me about Clara, you urged, your voice softening imperceptibly, a subtle shift in tone that only a keen ear would detect. You ushered her towards a less conspicuous corner, near a stack of crated statues awaiting their moment on the block. The cool, carved marble offered a stark backdrop to her unraveling grief. She's 24, the worried parent explained, her voice gaining a fragile strength. Bright, tenacious. He was investigating a series of anomalous financial reports. Old money, she called it. Unexplained wealth, tied to some big corporate names. He was convinced there was a pattern, something far deeper than just a few bad investments. Your mind, a labyrinth of forgotten files and unsolved cases, began to stir. Anomalous financial reports, you repeated, testing the words. Did she mention specific names, corporations? Not directly to me, she admitted, wringing her hands, but he was meeting with sources. Secretive, you know? She even hinted at a story that could expose a decades-old cover-up, something that would shake the city to its core. Vanished. Her apartment, undisturbed. Her laptop, gone. Her phone, off. You observed the raw desperation etched into her face, the tremor in her hands, the almost manic conviction in her voice. This was not the plea of a parent whose child had simply chosen to leave. This was a mother's primal fear, rooted in an unsettling certainty. The police, you knew, often dismissed such cases, especially when the missing person was an adult, especially when there were no obvious signs of struggle. It was easier to file it away, to label it a personal choice. You knew how easily the truth could be overlooked, how readily convenient narratives were adopted. She left no note. You pressed, your gaze unwavering. No message for you? No colleague she confided in? Nothing. She wept, a fresh wave of tears blurring her vision. I've called everyone. Her editor says he was on leave, working on a personal project. But he seemed cagey, like he knew more than he let on. And her closest friend, another young journalist, says Clara was acting strange, paranoid, in the days before she disappeared. Said she felt watched. A knot tightened in your stomach. Paranoid. Felt watched. These were not the words of a runaway. A young journalist digging into corporate corruption, hinting at a decades-old cover-up. It was a familiar melody, one that had played out tragically in your own life. You looked at the grieving parent, her face a canvas of anguish, her hope a fragile flicker. The cynicism was a heavy cloak, but underneath, a spark, long banked, began to glow. Start from the beginning. Every detail, no matter how small or insignificant it seems to you. The woman's breath hitched, a faint tremor of relief passing through her. Her eyes, still brimming with tears, held a nascent hope. The rhythmic chant of the auctioneer, a distant thrum through the heavy velvet drapes, was a counterpoint to the quiet storm brewing within you. The woman's words from moments ago still echoed. A fragile plea for a daughter vanished, Clara. You knew this dance. The way hope could curdle into despair, the way shadows lengthened under the brightest lights. You found a secluded corner, a makeshift desk tucked behind stacks of crated porcelain and shrouded canvases, away from the bustling attendants. Your weathered satchel, a constant companion, lay open. From its depths, you carefully extracted the few items the woman had provided. Clara's worn leather journal, a small, unassuming music box, and a single, unlaced sneaker. Mundane objects, yet each a whisper of a life abruptly paused. Your fingers traced the faint indentations on the journal's cover, a ghost of her grip. It wasn't a diary. The pages were filled with shorthand notes, interview snippets, and fragmented research. Clara, a journalist, had been chasing something. The entries were meticulously dated, almost obsessive in their detail, until they simply stopped. An abrupt halt, 3 days before her mother reported her missing. This was the first inconsistency. Clara was not one to leave a story unfinished, her mother had insisted. You pulled out your small, encrypted tablet, its screen a dull glow in the dim light. Connecting a portable scanner, you began digitizing pages, sifting for patterns, for the threads that always lay hidden beneath the surface. Vance Corp. The very name was a scar on your own past, a ghost that had hounded your steps for years. This wasn't just a missing person. The music box, a delicate thing of polished mahogany, felt heavy in your palm. Its lid was smooth, unremarkable. But as your thumb brushed against its base, you felt a slight, almost imperceptible seam. Your gaze sharpened. A common hiding spot, often overlooked. With the precise, practiced movement of a seasoned investigator, you applied gentle pressure, a subtle twist. The bottom panel clicked, then slid open, revealing not a musical mechanism, but a shallow, felt-lined cavity. Inside, nestled snugly, was a tiny, unassuming data drive. Smaller than your thumb, its metallic casing gleamed faintly. It was expertly hidden, the kind of concealment that spoke of urgency, of secrets meant to be kept from prying eyes. This wasn't something Clara would casually misplace. This was a deliberate act, a desperate measure. Foul play, then. Not a simple runaway, not a tragic accident. Your hands, steady despite the sudden spike of adrenaline, connected the drive to your tablet. The device hummed, then recognized the input. You entered a few common journalistic passwords, then some more complex ones, drawing on your knowledge of Clara's patterns, her mother's hints about her favorite authors, her birth date. On the third attempt, the folder unlocked. The contents were a torrent. Fragmented audio files, grainy images of corporate documents, email chains hinting at illicit transfers, shell companies, and land deals in remote, resource-rich regions. You recognized the logos of several subsidiaries of Vance Corp, their tendrils reaching into every corner of the market. This wasn't just corporate corruption. This was a spiderweb, intricate and vast, stretching back years, perhaps even decades. One document in particular caught your eye. A scanned memo dated just a week prior, detailing a proposed restructuring of a local environmental regulatory board. The names attached were prominent, untouchable, and at the bottom, a handwritten note in Clara's distinct, urgent script. Meeting with the Watchman, Old Harbor Warehouse. 11 p.m. No date, but the context suggested it was imminent. A rendezvous, a final desperate attempt to break the story, or perhaps to hand off this very drive. You were no longer just looking for a missing woman. You were standing on the precipice of a conspiracy, one that had already claimed Clara and threatened to consume anyone who dared to look too closely. The redemption you sought, the justice for Clara, suddenly felt inextricably linked to the very demons you had fought so long to bury. The tension was a living thing, a coiled serpent in your gut. In your palm, tucked away from prying eyes, rested a single, unassuming data chip. Clara's secret, a cold, hard kernel of truth that felt heavier than any gold. You moved with a practiced ease through the labyrinthine corridors, past the velvet ropes and the hushed conversations of collectors, their faces etched with avarice and calculation. Each step was a deliberate act, a quiet defiance against the invisible eyes you felt upon you. The security detail at the main exit, a hulking presence with eyes that scanned the crowd like a predator, held your gaze a fraction too long, a silent challenge in the crowded space. The city outside was a roar, a symphony of sirens and distant traffic. But your apartment, a sanctuary of dust motes and forgotten memories, offered the solitude you craved. The glow of your antique desk lamp cast long shadows as you inserted the data chip into a reader. The hum of your old laptop a comforting drone against the rising tide of unease. Clara's digital ghost flickered to life on the screen. It wasn't a neatly organized dossier, but a sprawling, chaotic web of encrypted files, fragmented documents, and cryptic notes. Her genius for misdirection was evident, each layer peeling back to reveal another, like an onion of digital deceit. Hours bled into one another, the city outside fading into a blur of neon and rain as you navigated the labyrinth. Coffee, black and bitter, was your only companion, fueling the relentless grind. Then, a breakthrough. A cluster of files, meticulously cross-referenced, began to form a pattern. The name Omnicorp surfaced repeatedly, an insidious weed weaving through seemingly disparate threads. Omnicorp, the tech behemoth whose tentacles stretched across every sector, from renewable energy to urban development, led by the charismatic, almost messianic, Silas Thorne. His face, omnipresent on billboards and news feeds, was a mask of benevolence, a promise of a brighter future. Clara's data painted a different picture. You found encrypted emails detailing questionable land acquisitions, shell companies funneling vast sums, and suppressed internal reports hinting at environmental damage from Omnicorp's manufacturing plants. Clara hadn't just been looking for a missing person. She'd been digging into a corporate empire built on a foundation of rot. The first subtle tremor of resistance came with the morning light. A call from a former colleague at the precinct, his voice unusually strained, a veiled warning tucked within the casual banter. "Heard you're digging into the Thorn case, Arthur. Best let sleeping dogs lie. Some things are bigger than any one of us." The message was clear. Back off. Official channels were closed, sealed tight against your inquiries. You tried to access public records on Omnicorp's land deals, only to find them frustratingly incomplete, some documents inexplicably redacted or missing entirely. It wasn't just stonewalling. It was an active obstruction, a silent chorus of voices telling you to stop. This wasn't just about Clara anymore. It was about the truth, about the innocent lives caught in Omnicorp's insidious web. The determination hardened in your eyes. They wanted you to back down? They wanted you to forget? Not this time. Not Arthur Vance. You had faced the beast before, and though it had scarred you, it hadn't broken you. The city, with its glittering towers and hidden alleys, held the answers, and you would rip them from its concrete heart, no matter the cost. The game had begun, and you were ready to play. You moved with a predator's quiet focus, your gaze sweeping over stacks of crated artifacts, draped furniture, and the hushed, almost reverent display of a rare first edition collection. This was Clara's last known professional stop, a place where secrets could be bought, sold, or, if you were lucky, merely misplaced. Your fingers traced the spines of antique tomes, their leather cracked and fragrant with centuries of dust. The faint, sweet decay of aged paper filled your nostrils. You weren't searching for a hidden vault or a coded message tacked to a wall. You sought the subtle disruption, the almost imperceptible ripple left by someone meticulous, yet suddenly in haste. A book slightly ajar, a loose page, a single item out of its precise catalogued order. Beneath a velvet cloth, draped over what appeared to be a Victorian writing desk, your hand brushed against something incongruous. Not the smooth, aged wood, but a sliver of rough paper. You peeled back the cloth, revealing a small, intricately carved drawer, its brass pull cool beneath your touch. The drawer was empty save for a single, tightly folded piece of parchment, tucked deep into a corner, almost adhering to the dark wood. It was an old-fashioned sort of paper, heavy and cream-colored, with a watermark you couldn't quite discern in the dim light. Your thumb and forefinger carefully unfolded the stiff sheet. No words, no direct names, just a grid of intersecting lines and a sequence. Omni 7 Delta 92. Below that, a single stark date, 1992-04-17. A cold, familiar dread tightened around your lungs, a phantom hand gripping your heart. Omnicorp. The name echoed in the silent chambers of your memory, a resonant bell tolling a dirge for your past. The date. April 17th, 1992. It was etched into your very bones, a permanent scar. The day the whistleblower, a mid-level manager named Elias Thorne, was found dead. His apartment a scene of staged chaos. His damning files on Omnicorp's illicit dealings vanished. The case that had cost you your badge, your reputation, everything. The air in the back room, once merely humid, now felt suffocating. You stared at Clara's precise markings, the grid, the code. It wasn't just a coincidence. Clara wasn't just investigating a missing art collector. He was digging into something far older, far deeper. The symbols, you realized, were a crude map, or perhaps a diagram of a building layout, hastily sketched but clearly showing a specific quadrant, an access point. The 7 Delta 92. A unit number, a file designation, perhaps even a specific internal project code within Omnicorp's vast labyrinthine network. Thorne, the whistleblower, had been about to expose Omnicorp's use of shell companies to launder funds and acquire illicit assets, some of which were high-value art pieces. Clara hadn't stumbled onto a simple missing person. He had unearthed a thread connected directly to the conspiracy that had destroyed Thorne, and, by extension, your life. This wasn't a random disappearance. It was a deliberate, calculated act. Someone knew he was close. The same powerful, invisible hand that had torn your career to shreds. A sudden rustle from the other side of a stack of antique tapestries made you tense, the parchment clutched tight in your hand. You slipped it into your inner jacket pocket, your movements fluid, practiced. A colleague from the auction house, a thin man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, rounded the corner. He glanced at you, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes before it settled into a professional smile. "Find what you were looking for, Arthur Vance?" the colleague asked, his voice smooth but with an underlying edge. "The auction begins shortly. You'll want a good seat if you're bidding." "Perhaps," you said, already turning, your mind racing, the intricate web of deceit now stretching across decades, ensnaring Clara in its deadly threads. This wasn't just about Clara anymore, not just about redemption. It was about Thorn. It was about the truth that had been buried for too long. And now you knew you were walking directly back into the very heart of the storm that had once consumed you. The past was not merely echoing. It was rising, hungry and alive, demanding reckoning. Dust motes danced in the anemic shafts of light piercing the high, grimy windows, illuminating stacks of forgotten crates and shrouded antique furniture. Your gaze, however, cut through the quiet clutter, fixing on the junior analyst from Omnicorp, a nervous man with darting eyes, attempting to blend into the shadows near a rolling cart laden with fragile porcelain. You moved with the deceptive languor of a predator, each step measured, deliberate. The floorboards, ancient and protesting, barely whispered beneath your weight. The analyst, engrossed in a frantic text message, started violently as your shadow fell over him, a sudden eclipse. His phone clattered, a stark sound in the stillness, echoing the tremor in his hands. "Relax," you murmured, your voice a low rasp, a sound meant to soothe, carrying an undeniable edge. "We just need a quiet word, you and I." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like a trapped bird. I don't know you. I'm busy. The sale starts soon." His words were a thin shield, easily pierced. You leaned closer, your presence a physical weight. "Clara Vance. The name means something to you, doesn't it? And the old case, the one they swept under the rug, back when Omnicorp was just a fledgling entity. You've been digging, haven't you? Asking questions where you shouldn't." His eyes, wide and bloodshot, flickered around the cavernous room, searching for an escape, for a savior. Finding none, they returned to your unwavering gaze. I just found some discrepancies. Nothing major, just old accounting ledgers, cross-referenced with some archival press releases. It's all so convoluted." He stammered, the words tumbling out in a desperate flood. "There was a shell company, tied to a land deal years ago. The land where the old factory stood, the one that burned down. It was a cover. Not for the fire, but for something else. Something buried." "Buried how?" You pressed, your voice a low thrum against the backdrop of distant, muffled auctioneer calls. They weren't the families. They were proxies. And the paper trail, it leads to a man high up. He orchestrated it all. He was the legal architect. He made sure the records vanished, the witnesses were discredited. A sudden sharp crack echoed from the far end of the room. Not a gunshot, but the sound of something heavy striking wood. The analyst flinched, his head whipping around. A gloved hand clamped over his mouth, another snaked around his waist. He let out a choked cry, a sound abruptly cut short. You lunged, a desperate animalistic roar tearing from your throat, but they were too fast, too practiced. The door slammed shut with a sickening thud, and the vehicle peeled away, tires squealing, vanishing into the maze of city streets. You stood there, breathing heavily, the adrenaline thrumming through your veins, your fists clenched, useless. You scanned the floor, your eyes raking every inch, searching for anything, any trace. And there, gleaming faintly beneath the porcelain cart, was a small, heavy object. You knelt, your fingers trembling slightly as you retrieved it. You knew this ring. You had seen it countless times, glinting on the hand of a man you once revered. A man who had taught you the intricacies of justice, the subtle art of the law. Arthur Vance. The name echoed in your mind, a bitter taste on your tongue. The deputy chief. The ring felt like a brand in your palm, searing through the thin veneer of professional detachment. This wasn't just about corporate malfeasance. This was personal. Deeply, irrevocably personal. The intricate web of deceit had not merely stretched across decades. It had always been closer, woven into the very fabric of your past, a silent, venomous thread waiting to tighten. The analyst's choked gasp was a sudden, ugly tear in the quiet hum of the server racks. A blur of motion, swift and silent as a shadow, materialized behind him. A gloved hand clamped over his mouth, another twisting his arm with brutal efficiency. Your mind, already racing from the digital specter of Omnicorp, registered the immediate threat. This wasn't a warning. It was an execution. You lunged, a desperate animalistic surge, your hand reaching for the discarded chair. But the assailant was faster, a phantom of trained violence. The analyst, eyes wide with terror, sagged, a limp weight in the stranger's grip. The screen before you, still flashing with the incriminating logs, flickered as the power cable was yanked from the server. A silent digital scream. Not a gun, you realized with a jolt, but a stiletto, honed to a wicked point. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of dust and the metallic tang of fear. Vance, a low, gravelly voice rumbled, devoid of inflection. You were warned. Your warning. This was Thorne's message, delivered with a brutal flourish. You met the stranger's gaze, a defiance burning in your own. You wouldn't back down, not now. A short, sharp burst of static crackled from the stranger's earpiece. Only the distant murmur of the crowd, awaiting the record sale, filtered faintly through the thick walls. You stood amidst the silent racks, heart a frantic drum against your ribs. A small, unassuming USB drive, almost swallowed by the dust bunnies and discarded cables. He must have dropped it, a last desperate act of defiance. This was it. The proof. You snatched the drive, your fingers closing around its cool plastic. You needed to move, and move fast. The USB drive, a tiny key to a vast conspiracy, felt heavy in your pocket. Hours later, hunched over a battered laptop in the cramped, smoke-stained apartment of an old contact, the air thick with stale coffee and the ghost of cheap cigarettes, you felt a tremor of anticipation. The contact, a wizened network architect whose fingers danced across the keyboard with the precision of a surgeon, grunted, his eyes never leaving the screen. Deep, he muttered. Real deep. Encrypted layers like an onion. Whoever built this wanted it buried. The hours stretched, punctuated only by the click-clack of keys and the occasional curse from the architect. This wasn't just a missing person. This was a war. Finally, a triumphant, if weary sigh escaped the architect. Got it, he announced, leaning back, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. A full data dump from Omnicorp's internal servers. Not just logs, Vance. Schematics, financial transfers, communications. He rotated the laptop, and you leaned in, your breath catching in your throat. The screen glowed with a spreadsheet, rows and columns of data, names, dates, and figures. Your eyes scanned, searching, then landed on a specific entry. Project Chimera. Beneath it, a series of financial transactions, large sums funneled through shell corporations. The dates were startling. They aligned precisely with the disappearance of Clara, the missing Omnicorp scientist. The signatory, it's a subsidiary of Omnicorp, but the direct beneficiary, the name attached to the account's ultimate control. It's a shell company registered under a variant of Thorne's family name. A subtle twist, but unmistakable. The revelation hit you with the force of a physical blow. Concrete proof. Omnicorp, Clara's disappearance, and the decades-old murder of the journalist. All woven together, all pointing back to Thorne, the architect of your downfall. He wasn't just a corporate titan. He was a murderer, a conspirator, a ghost from your past come to haunt the present. A bitter taste filled your mouth. This wasn't just about redemption anymore. It was about vengeance. You had the proof. Now you just needed to make sure it saw the light of day. The game had escalated, and you were now holding the most dangerous card. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light escaping the heavy velvet curtains, illuminating the silent array of artifacts awaiting their moment on the block. Polished mahogany gleamed beside tarnished silver, each item a hushed testament to lives lived and fortunes spent. The muffled murmur of the main hall, a distant ocean tide, underscored the profound quiet of this space. The revelation of Thorne's orchestrations, the chilling truth that he was not merely a pawn but the architect of your undoing. And now, the likely nexus of Clara's disappearance and the decades-old murder had solidified into a cold, hard knot in your gut. The betrayal was a bitter taste, a constant companion since the previous night's grim discovery. Your contact, a nervous, whispered voice on a burner phone, had pointed you here to a specific lot. An ornate writing desk, French Empire, dark wood with intricate brass inlays. It stood apart, almost regal, its surface scarred by time but still commanding attention. The wood felt cool beneath your touch, a veneer of elegance hiding something more sinister. The contact's tip had been precise, a hidden compartment, known only to a select few, used to transfer sensitive information, or perhaps something far worse. You ran your hand along the underside of the main drawer, searching for the almost imperceptible seam, the faint give in the aged timber. The backroom attendant, a young man with darting eyes, was engrossed in cataloging a collection of porcelain figurines, oblivious to your true purpose. A subtle click, barely audible above the distant hum of the building, rewarded your persistence. A slim panel, almost invisible, slid open, revealing a shallow recess. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay not jewels nor cash, but a compact encrypted data chip and a thin leather-bound ledger. Your fingers trembled as you extracted them. The ledger, however, felt heavy, its pages crackling with unspoken narratives. You flipped it open, the faded ink a testament to its age. It wasn't a standard accounting book. Dates, code names, and cryptic entries filled the pages, interspersed with precise financial figures. Your eyes scanned the meticulously recorded transactions, recognizing the telltale signs of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and illicit transfers. Omnicorp's name appeared repeatedly, often alongside the initials TV and CM, Thorne Vance and Clara Miller. A wave of nausea washed over you. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance. The sums involved, the specific dates, the coded references to asset procurement and information management. They painted a picture of a vast, brutal enterprise. Then your gaze fell upon an entry, stark and undeniable, dated 2 decades prior. Journalist eradication, Project Chimera initiated. Oversight, TV. The world tilted. Thorne, your mentor. And Clara, her disappearance linked directly to Project Chimera, a continuation of the same murderous operation. The depth of his depravity, the sheer scale of his machinations unfurled before you, a poisonous bloom. He had not just ruined your life. He had built an empire on blood and lies, meticulously covering his tracks for decades. He was the true mastermind, the spider at the center of the web. Now, the full extent of his network and his ruthlessness became horrifyingly clear. As you carefully slipped the chip and ledger into an inner pocket, the backroom attendant's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a flicker of concern crossing his face, then looked up, his eyes meeting yours. A sudden, unsettling recognition. His gaze lingered, then shifted to the now closed compartment of the desk. He hadn't seen you take anything, but something in his expression, a subtle tightening around his mouth, spoke volumes. Before you could react, your own phone vibrated. A single, anonymous text message. The words burned into your vision. Your loved ones are now exposed. Your choices have consequences. Thorn knew. He knew you had the proof, and he was already moving, his reach extending beyond the auction house, beyond the city, threatening the few remaining anchors in your shattered life. The true mastermind had revealed himself, and in doing so, had placed a target on everyone you held dear. You had the truth, but the cost of exposing it might be more than you could bear. Velvet ropes, coiled like sleeping serpents, lay beside polished display cases, awaiting their moment. Thorn knew. He knew you held the thread that unraveled his meticulously woven tapestry of deceit, the proof that stained his legacy and Omnicorp's gleaming facade. You traced the ornate carving on a discarded packing crate, your mind a storm of calculations. The intricate patterns blurred, replaced by the stark geometry of a trap. How to spring it. How to expose the rot without being consumed by it yourself. The auction itself, a spectacle of wealth and avarice, offered a stage. But Thorn, your former mentor, was no fool. He would anticipate your move, or at least he would move to prevent any move at all. You needed more than just a revelation. You needed an irresistible lure, a bait so tempting it would draw him into the light, where his machinations could be seen. A flash of movement caught your eye, a junior appraiser, too eager, too nervous, adjusting a spotlight over a canvas shrouded in silk. The painting, you knew, was the centerpiece, rumored to fetch an astronomical sum. This was not just a sale. It was an act of laundering, a final, audacious scrub of dirty money, disguised as legitimate commerce. And then, the revelation struck you, sharp and sudden as a shard of glass. It wasn't just about covering up the decades-old murder or the corporate malfeasance. The missing persons case, the one that started this whole descent, was merely a loose thread in this new, elaborate tapestry. The record sale wasn't just a convenient backdrop. It was the final, critical exchange in a much larger, more immediate scheme, a way to liquidate the ill-gotten gains and sever the last ties to the vanished. The evidence you held wasn't just damning. It was explosive, capable of derailing this entire imminent transaction. This was no longer just about redemption for your badge. It was about stopping a crime in progress, preventing an even greater injustice. You had to interrupt the sale, not just expose the past, but dismantle the present. Your fingers brushed the cold metal of the drive again, a silent promise. The plan, dangerous and reckless, began to form its jagged edges. You would not just deliver the evidence. You would deliver it through the auction, using its very platform as your weapon. The public eye, the media, the live broadcast, these would be your unwitting allies. You thought of the main hall, the elevated podium, the cameras positioned to capture every bid, every nod. If the truth could be broadcast, if the evidence could be projected onto those screens, or delivered into the hands of a reputable journalist present for the record sale itself, it would spread like wildfire. Thorn would have to act, and in acting, he would expose himself. The risk was immense. You would be a target, not just for Thorn, but for the entire apparatus of Omnicorp. Your freedom, your life, they would be on the line. But the alternative, a world where Thorn continued his predation, where the missing remained lost and the dead unavenged, was a far greater cost. You moved towards a service entrance, the soft thrum of the building's ventilation system a low growl in your ears. The plan was a fragile thing, a house of cards built on the precipice of chaos, but it was all you had. You would need to move swiftly, subtly, before the auctioneer's voice boomed its opening pronouncement. You would need to become a ghost in the machine, weaving through the security, past the watchful eyes, to plant the seed of truth where it could bloom into undeniable scandal. The net was closing, yes, but you would be the one to pull the strings, even if it meant becoming ensnared yourself. The time for caution was over. The time for the trap was now. Whispers, hushed and reverent, drifted from the main hall, a distant murmuring tide. But here, in the nerve center, a different kind of quiet settled, taut and predatory. Your breath, a silent fog in the chill, hitched with the weight of the moment. The small, innocuous device, disguised as a cufflink, pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth against your skin. You had arranged this meeting with a meticulous hand, luring them into this gilded cage with the bait of a fabricated ledger, hinting at a flaw in their impenetrable fortress of lies. First, the former mentor, his silver hair impeccably combed, his tailored suit a shroud of authority. The trap was set. Arthur, the former mentor's voice was a low rumble, laced with a false cordiality that scraped against your raw nerves. I confess I didn't expect you to resurface, not after everything. His smile did not reach his eyes, and certainly not here, meddling in affairs beyond your station. You met his gaze, unflinching. Some affairs have a way of finding their way back to the light, regardless of who tries to bury them. Your voice was steady, a stone skipping across a calm pond, though beneath the surface, a storm churned. Especially when they involved the disappearance of an innocent, the quiet acquisition of valuable assets through less than legal means. We have no time for the musings of a disgraced investigator. His tone was like gravel grinding underfoot. Show us this ledger you promised. This little reunion ends. The ledger is merely a distraction, Thorne, you countered, your gaze flicking between the two men. The true accounting is far more damning. You gestured to a polished display case, its glass reflecting the dim overhead lights. Inside, an antique pocket watch gleamed, its gold casing intricately engraved. That watch belonged to the missing person's grandfather, a man who coincidentally worked for Omnicorp just before the first accident that paved the way for your corporate ascension, Mentor. The former mentor's composure flickered, a momentary tremor in his carefully constructed facade. You're grasping at straws, Arthur. A sentimental trinket proves nothing. Doesn't it? You stepped closer to the case, your voice dropping, each word a chisel against their resolve. The grandfather, a brilliant engineer, had discovered a fundamental flaw in Omnicorp's core infrastructure. A flaw that, if exposed, would have cost the company billions, perhaps even destroyed it. He planned to blow the whistle, but he never got the chance. They realized the truth, the same truth that cost me my badge years ago when I got too close to Omnicorp's clean image. They reached out to an old contact, a journalist, but you got to them first. You took them, hoping to recover the proof, to erase the last vestige of your crime. But they were smarter than you gave them credit for. They left a trail, a digital breadcrumb, leading right here to this very auction house, where Omnicorp is quietly liquidating assets to cover its tracks, including that watch, a symbolic final insult. You've gone mad, Arthur, the former mentor hissed, his eyes now blazing with an unmasked fury. You have no proof. Oh, I do, you corrected, a grim smile touching your lips. The journals, the hidden data, the coded messages, all of it is being broadcast right now. Every word we've spoken, every confession, every accusation. The world is listening, Mentor. They're finally hearing the truth about Omnicorp, about the decades of corruption, about the lives you've crushed to build your empire. A low growl escaped Silas Thorne. "Kill him, now." The two security guards lunged, their movements practiced, brutal. You anticipated it, having already taken a half step back, your hand going to the concealed impact weapon at your waist. The first guard, a mountain of muscle, swung a fist like a wrecking ball. You ducked under it, the air whistling past your ear, and countered with a sharp jab to his solar plexus, followed by a swift knee to his chin. He staggered back, gasping, his eyes watering. The second guard was quicker, lunging with a knife glinting in the dim light. Pain flared, but you ignored it, adrenaline surging. You twisted, using his momentum against him, slamming his head into the polished display case. The glass spiderwebbed but held, the guard slumping to the floor, stunned. You along with it. A shot cracked, deafening in the confined space. The bullet shrieked past your head, embedding itself in the wall behind you, showering you with plaster dust. You dove, rolling behind a heavy velvet-draped table, the ancient wood groaning under your weight. The scent of gunpowder stung your nostrils. Another shot, then another, splintering the tabletop, sending shards of wood flying. You knew you couldn't stay hidden. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ensuring the truth, now echoing across the world, remained uncorrupted. You had to stop them from reaching the broadcast signal, from silencing the final damning evidence. This was the precipice. The moment where all the fractured pieces of your life, your past, and your pursuit of justice converged. You gripped your weapon, heart hammering, and prepared to face the storm. The ancient velvet, thick with the dust of forgotten eras, scrapes against your cheek as you press yourself low behind the table. Plaster dust, a fine, ghostly snowfall, coats your hair and the back of your coat. A shadow falls across the polished floorboards, a heavy tread approaching your makeshift barricade. You don't wait. Your own hand, steady despite the tremor in your gut, sweeps across the worn wood, finding the cold, familiar weight of your sidearm. You roll, a practiced, fluid motion, emerging from behind the table not standing but crouched. Weapon raised, a burly enforcer whose face you'd seen in grainy surveillance photos. Freezes, his own weapon still angled downwards, a moment too late. Your shot is clean, precise, not meant to end a life, but to end the threat. He crumples, clutching the wound, his face pale beneath the grime. Before you can fully process the immediate danger averted, the door to the back room bursts open, not with another assailant, but with a rush of uniformed figures. They flood in, their movements swift and coordinated, weapons drawn, their voices sharp commands cutting through the residual tension. The orchestrated chaos you had anticipated, the one you had gambled your life on, has arrived. The architect of the scheme, a man whose polished exterior had masked a core of venality, is found cowering in a nearby office, surrounded by stacks of falsified ledgers and the very documents you had risked everything to retrieve. He offers no resistance, his empire, built on a foundation of deception and greed, crumbling around him in the harsh glare of flashlights and official scrutiny. Arrests follow swiftly, a domino effect. The enforcers, the complicit managers, the network of facilitators, all are rounded up, their faces a mixture of shock, resignation, and impotent rage. The back room, once a stage for quiet corruption, transforms into a hub of law enforcement activity. Evidence bags appear, their clear plastic shimmering as they seal away the tangible proof of years of systematic larceny. You watch, leaning against a velvet-draped wall, the adrenaline slowly receding, leaving behind a profound weariness that settles deep in your bones. You already know. Clara. Where? You ask, your voice raspy. A forgotten storage unit miles from here. They tried to make it look like a runaway, but it was clear. The timing, the method, it matches what you suspected. She pauses, her eyes softening. A rare display of empathy. Her laptop was there. Encrypted, but her notes. They're meticulously detailed. Every connection, every transaction, every name. The final piece. She knew Arthur. She knew what they were doing, and she documented it all. A wave of grief, sharp and potent, washes over you, mingling with a surge of fierce pride. Her sacrifice, tragic and heartbreaking, had not been in vain. Her work, her courage, had ensured justice. It was her ghost, not just yours, that would finally rest. The physical scars are minor. A bruise blossoming on your shoulder where the bullet grazed the wall, a deep cut on your palm from a shard of plaster, and the persistent ache of exhaustion that permeates every muscle. But the emotional scars run deeper, a complex tapestry woven from loss, betrayal, and the heavy weight of redemption. You feel the dull throb of Clara's absence, the echo of the past injustices that had cost you your badge, and the stark relief of finally pulling back the curtain on the truth. News of the arrests spreads like wildfire. The headlines scream, emblazoned across every digital screen and newspaper stand. Corporate empire crumbles. Decades of corruption exposed. Whistleblowers' sacrifice leads to justice. The public grapples with the sheer scale of the deception, the audacity of the powerful figures who had operated with impunity for so long. They call it heroism, a quiet, dogged brand of it that had chipped away at a mountain of lies. You stand there, amidst the controlled chaos of the investigation, the sounds of distant sirens fading into the hum of the city. The air, though still carrying the ghost of gunpowder, also holds a new scent, that of a future, uncertain perhaps, but cleansed. The long night is finally over, and the dawn, though still distant, feels inevitable. Velvet ropes, thick and plush, partition the space, guiding the flow of hushed voices and discreet gestures. Through a narrow gap in the heavy drapes, you watch the bustling floor, a theater of avarice and hushed negotiations. Your fingers, calloused from years of gripping truths, trace the cold metal of the small, unassuming device in your pocket. Clara's work, her sacrifice, a digital heart, beating with the proof you needed, the culmination of her relentless pursuit of light in the deepest shadows. Her final gift, bought with the ultimate price. You felt the tremor of it, not fear, but the deep, resonant hum of a journey's end. Now, here, in this elegant cage of commerce, the final act was set to unfold. A subtle shift in the room caught your eye. The principal, the architect of the decades-old murder and the corporate rot that festered beneath the city's veneer, entered the main hall. He moved with the practiced ease of a predator, his gaze sweeping the room, settling for a fraction of a second on the raised dais where the next lot was about to be presented. A subtle nod, almost imperceptible, passed between him and a discreet figure in the third row. A proxy, ready to secure or, if necessary, destroy. Your breath hitched, a silent prayer for Clara, for all the innocent lives crushed under the weight of this man's ambition. The item, a seemingly ordinary antique ledger, bound in worn leather, was carefully placed on the stand. Its innocuous appearance belied the venomous secrets it held within its brittle pages. A meticulous record of illicit transactions, shell companies, and the final damning details of the murder that had haunted you for years. It was the physical manifestation of Clara's digital revelations, the missing link. The auctioneer's voice, a smooth, practiced drone, began its litany, praising the ledger's supposed historical value. The bidding started low, then escalated, driven by the ringleader's proxy, a frantic push to acquire the item before its true nature could be revealed. The tension coiled in your gut, a taut wire stretched to its breaking point. This was the moment. You met the eyes of the detective, a stoic woman who had, against her initial skepticism, come to trust your fragmented truths. A barely perceptible nod passed between you. She moved, a shadow detaching itself from the periphery, her presence suddenly solid, undeniable. "Stop the sale." Her voice, clear and authoritative, cut through the auctioneer's rhythmic chant, silencing the room. Every head snapped towards her, then towards the dais. The ringleader's face, usually a mask of calm composure, fractured. The proxy froze, his hand still raised, mid-bid. You stepped out from the drapes, your presence a silent challenge. He knew. He finally knew his reign was over. The ringleader, trapped, was led away, his face a grim testament to his defeat, his empire crumbling around him. The weight of it all settled upon you, a profound exhaustion that seeped into your bones. Justice, a fragile, elusive thing, had finally been served. The years of doubt, the shadow of disgrace, the gnawing certainty that you'd failed, all began to recede, replaced by a quiet, aching sense of vindication. You thought of Clara, her determined eyes, her meticulous notes, her unwavering belief in the truth. Her sacrifice, a searing wound in your memory, was not in vain. Her work, combined with your relentless pursuit, had brought down a titan of corruption. The decades-old murder, the one that had been swept under the rug and cost you everything, finally had its reckoning. The auction house emptied, leaving behind only the ghosts of ambition and the lingering scent of resolution. You walked out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring into a shimmering haze. The world felt different, sharper, yet imbued with a newfound quietness. The peace you sought wasn't a roaring triumph, but a fragile, hard-won stillness. The badge was gone, the past irrevocably scarred, but a measure of redemption had been found. The fight wasn't over. It never truly was. But for now, a breath, a moment of quiet, a fragile peace, earned in the heart of a storm.